How can you miss me if I don't go away? Yes, I took last week off, kids, and if you were on my socials, you will note that I was off on a special assignment. I was off on a nostalgia trip, and I had a really, really good time, and I'll tell you all about it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. Can you hear in my voice that I have another head cold? This is the third head cold of 2023. 2023 has been for me a year of just really bad physical health. I got to come out and say that right off the top here, because this is the third freaking head cold I've had, and it's making me a little bit crazy. I do not need to go over the back spasms again. 2 solid months of back spasms, which were accompanied for about 3 weeks by a cold and cough, and I kept coughing and knocking my back out. And then a few weeks ago, just for like 3, 4, 5 days, I had that awful pain, sick feeling in the back of my nose, bit of a cough. I'm like, really? How is it possible that I have another one already? And now, as I speak to you, after a little hiatus, I have another one. And I'm drinking my lemon ginger tea. That's an old vocalist's trick, and I'm an old vocalist. I think I got this particular head cold on an aircraft. Well, that's right, kids. I was on a series of aircrafts last week. Now, here's what happened now, right? A few months ago, our old friends in Stryper, 80s metal legends, icons, announced tour dates for their brand new record, The Final Battle, which is a heck of a little record to check out if you have not done so yet. They announced a bunch of tour dates, and they're playing just around the States for the most part, at this point anyways. And there was a date in Seattle, Washington, and our old pal Dews writes me a message, and he says, hey, look at Seattle. What do you think? And Dews lives in a suburb of Vancouver, British Columbia, just a hop and a skip from Seattle, man, from Fraser Crane. So I said, let me think on that for a minute. And then I thought, you know what? YOLO, man. Yo freaking low. What's the truth? What's the truth? It's a long flight from T-Dot. It's a quick in and out because we're all busy people. And how many more years are Stryper going to be touring at the kind of level that they are right now? Now, these cats are in their freaking 60s, okay? It was 34 years ago when I saw Stryper for the one and only time at an arena in Muskegon, Michigan, 1989, on the In God We Trust tour. Now, you would think I would have seen them more times than that, but the truth is one and one time only. And I thought, you know what? I haven't seen Dews in a while. I have not been out west in a while, and I really love it out west. I really love BC. There's just a different vibe out there, man. There's just a different feeling in the air than you get here. You know, I flew into Abbotsford, and, you know, you descend and you see the mountains. When you fly into Vancouver, it's stunning. You know, the mountains that surround the city. You see the ocean. It's like, why do I not live here? But it's a weird thing for Canadians. Americans are very intrepid. Americans city hop like nobody's business, man. You talk to them, and they've lived everywhere. I was in Burbank for a while, then I moved to Chicago, then I was in Minneapolis, then I took a job in Asheville, North Carolina. Then I was in Miami, and then I settled in Dallas. They just do this. They city hop. Now, in Canada, you got about 5 options, all right? And 4 of those are freezing all the time. You know, it's not as though there's a bevy of places you can go and live in this country, especially if you're not into the cold freaking weather. So to a certain extent, I understand that. But picking up and moving across the country is something I think about every now and again, and it just makes me tired. It's like logistically, how do you even, it's like I can't deal, man. Americans seem to do this all the time, and I applaud them for that, okay? So ultimately, I made the decision, yes, I will do the thing that probably most of us would not do, which is fly on a Monday, come home on a Wednesday, fly all the way across the freaking country to go see an 80s metal band in a little club in Seattle. Now, I do not want to do a thing on air travel, all right? I'm not a comedian, and that premise has been hacked to freaking death. But I will say, the flight out, bit of a challenge. All right, my flight was delayed. Ultimately, like 6 hours. You know, I got up in the morning. I had an airport shuttle to catch down to Toronto Pearson. And as I'm getting on the shuttle, it's like, yeah, your flight's delayed 2 hours. Ugh. All right, that happens these days. You know, air travel these days is somewhat dicey, you know. It's interesting because I'm a history person. As you know, I'm a history person. And I see on Instagram, because I follow a lot of history accounts on the Instagram, right? And they will put up photos of air travel in the 50s or air travel in the 60s, and it looks so dignified, you know? It really was kind of an upper crust thing back in the day. You know, men are wearing suits and ties. Women are all dressed up. The stewardesses, all dressed up. The planes look like 70s houses, you know, like shag carpet. There's lots of leg room. The seats are big. It looks like everybody's having a great freaking time, man. I can imagine that was expensive back in the day for those people. But I look at those pictures and I'm like, wow, air travel used to be freaking cool, man. It used to be a thing you dressed up for. It was a privilege. It was a rare thing. And I don't know when that changed. I'm guessing the 90s. And you know what it's like now, okay? It is sardine time. There is almost no room, especially if you are taking, as I was, one of these discount flights on a discount airline. And you know the game you're playing when you start doing that, because they're going to nickel and dime you on every freaking thing. Baggage. There's nothing free on the plane. I don't know, man. They took it from being this really great experience, fly the friendly skies, and they turned it into just another kind of capitalist, grind you, death march kind of freaking thing. Now, I've had good flights, all right? I have done intercontinental. I have done ocean flights where, we flew KLM to Europe a couple times on Sarah tours, and we had a ball. You know, the flight attendants, particularly the first time, 2017, we flew the red eye to Amsterdam, and they had all the young flight attendants working. You know, I think the veterans don't want the red eye, man, so they put the new blood on there. So everybody's young, and they all looked exactly the same. They were blonde Dutch girls who had rolled off an assembly line together. Pleasant, happy, had not been jaded yet by the game. And we had a great freaking time. You know, it felt as though we were all on the trip together, you know? And I've flown other airlines that were somewhat less pleasant than that, you know? I've had some laughs. We flew, I forget which airline we flew, for one of the tours. And this woman who was running our section of the plane was not a happy human being. And we tried our best to be endearing. Ken and Denny and me, the guys in the band, trying to make her smile, trying to make her laugh. And she just kept getting more and more annoyed. And she was like yelling at people. And it's like, wowzers, maybe it's time to get off the plane and go into training. You know what I mean? Discount airlines, you know what you're getting. All right. So by the time I get to TDOT, I think my flight is delayed another couple hours. So we're like 4 hours delayed at this point. And then they got us on the plane, finally. And then we sat there and we sat there and we sat there. And then they said, get off the plane. Delayed us another couple hours. So in the grand scheme of things, it was like a 6 hour delay. And you know what? I don't mind that. I would have preferred to have gotten on when it was supposed to happen and to have flown. And, I would have arrived in BC by the time we eventually freaking left. But it's okay because I like airports, all right? I set myself down in the departures lounge at gate whatever with, a beverage in my hand. And I just watched the runway. I was positioned such that I could watch planes coming in. And that is, it's kind of a soothing, it's kind of a meditative thing, but it's also stunning to watch, man. Because a plane comes in, if you ever watch a plane land, I couldn't see them actually hit the ground, but I could see them just gently gliding. It's amazing how they just glide in, and then they touch down softly and disappear around the corner. And by the time the one plane is ready to land, you can see the next one coming. You can see the speck on the horizon. And it lands and you can see the speck on the horizon. And it lands and you can see the speck on the horizon. It's amazing. The clockwork nature of operations at airports, especially at a big international airport like Pearson. Something like, it's over 1,000 flights leave Pearson Airport every day. Like, think of the sheer logistics of that. You look at the big board in a big airport, and you just look at all of the flights that are coming in and where they're coming from. Frankfurt, Atlanta, Jakarta, Madrid, LA, whatever. They're just coming, Nagoya. They're coming from everywhere around the world. And somehow they manage to coordinate that they're all landing. You see them coming just one after the other, dropping in, dropping in, dropping in. And then the flights that are leaving, and they're going to Cancun and London, UK, and Melbourne and Shanghai. It's amazing. To me, it's amazing. The sheer logistics, the sheer connectedness of it all. And so I stand at the big board and I just watch this happen. And I like the vibe around airports. I like this sense of people going off on an adventure, I like all of that. There's something about airports that really appeals to me. I didn't take my first flight until I was in my 20s, I'm very much a late bloomer with almost everything. So I didn't mind, all right? I didn't mind having to have my flight delayed and sit there and just sort of take in the atmosphere of the airport. I like that, all right? So fine. Eventually, we got on a plane that was actually going to fly, and I'm not going to complain about having been put on a plane and then pulled off a plane again. Because, I'd rather take a plane that isn't going to crash, most likely. And apparently the original plane couldn't even get off the ground. So I'm pleased that the people in charge of that discount airline were savvy enough to say, let's get a different plane if we can, Worth waiting for to not crash off the end of the runway. You know what I mean? Made it out west. Got to hang out with our old pal Deuce, which was great. Deuce and I were high school buddies. And then he did the smart freaking thing and moved out west when the moving was good. I did not do that. And I won't complain about that either. Because the truth is, kids, truth be known, truth be told, I got a pretty good life here. All right? I've got a lot of good friends. I have a social life. Everything I've done in music has been as a consequence of being here in this scene. So, as much as I really enjoy the scenery out west and the softer winter, and perhaps one day I will find my way out there. But I cannot be chagrined, all right? Because things have worked out pretty well here, and that's okay, Let's have faith in the way things are, as the Tao says. So anyways, we're going to drive down to Seattle, all right? We're going to drive from V-Town down to Seattle. That's like 2 hours down the highway. Pretty easy, actually. And I've never been to Seattle before. Never been to Seattle. Now, a lot of my Saturday nights are spent watching Frasier reruns on CMT because my life is a rich, full oyster, as Lewis Black said. And so I have this affinity for Seattle. It's got the reputation as being a cool place. And of course, the whole grunge thing, right? We know I'm not a grunge guy, but Seattle is a monumental place in the history of music. I've never been. And I don't know what to expect from American cities these days. I have a certain reluctance to go into the States because the news coming out of it and the way it's reported makes it sound like America's just a freaking war zone right now. So there's just a hint of trepidation if you're an anxious person like I am. It's like, do I really want to go down there and risk it? And that's very short-sighted thinking, okay? That is not the reality 99% of the time. Now, I've never been to Seattle, and so we're driving in, and Seattle is really, really lovely. Seattle is a really pretty city, man, and we were downtown. This club that Stryper was playing called El Corazon, however you say it, I don't know, man. Just this, kind of perfect, gritty little rock club downtown, right? And so we get in early because I had a notion, I'm savvy enough to know that soundcheck happens in the afternoon, right? So I was thinking to myself, if we get down there early enough and we breeze by the club, we might be able to hear a bit of soundcheck happening, We wanted to leave ourselves lots of time. You never quite know with traffic into a big city like that. So we're rolling into town. I see the Space Needle. Wow, Seattle, man. I see the Space Needle. I see the buildings. It's on the water. Really, really pretty, man. Must be said. So we get downtown. We find parking. That is an important milestone on any journey into a big city. Finding a parking spot that is legal and safe, and you don't have to worry about the car until it's time to go home. That's always a great relief, man. Getting the car parked and you don't have to worry about it. Whether you're going to Van or Seattle or Toronto or anywhere, finding a parking spot is a big freaking deal. So we get a spot a couple blocks from the club, really great, and it's mid-afternoon, I don't know. Do you want to go by the club and check it out? Yeah, let's go by the club and check it out. So we're walking the streets, and Seattle, at least the part of it we were in, is clean, and it's vibrant, and there weren't even all that many people around, which I found a little bit strange. Mid-afternoon on a Tuesday in a major metropolitan area. Weren't a lot of people around, but, everything felt very safe. Everything felt very clean. Very pretty city. Liked it a lot. I'm giving Seattle a big thumb up, man. I liked it there. I thought it was really, really freaking cool. So we walk around, right? We turn the corner, and it's kind of beside a bridge, where a rock club should be. And we just see kind of the front doors of this place, and parked out front is a gorgeous tour bus with the trailer on the back, and it's like, obviously, Stryper's gear. So they're doing okay, kids. They're making some money because tours are being canceled. Tours are being canceled these days because tour buses are A, so hard to find, and B, so cost prohibitive. It's a real freaking problem. Like, a lot of bands are like, we can't do it. We cannot afford the overheads to tour anymore, especially if you are a club level band. It's like, we just can't do it. Gas is too expensive. The buses are too expensive. We simply cannot do it and make ends meet. And now the club wants a piece of our merch. It just doesn't add up. And so for Stryper to even get their hands on one of these buses and have the resources to drive it round, pretty good, man. And so really nice bus parked out front, a few people milling about. And we get to the front door, and it's kind of situated on the corner of a block, right? And front door is like mid-block, and the corner of the building is at the corner of the block. And I'm hearing music, man. music over my head. I'm hearing music, and I'm like, pretty sure soundcheck is happening right now. And so we walk down the block, right? Walk past the tour bus. They got the engine compartment open, and one of the crew members is like in there with screwdrivers and stuff. I'm like, wow, do we want the crew fixing the bus? Maybe we do. Maybe we do. I've never done a bus tour, so I cannot say. And so we get to the corner of the building, and isn't there a security door open? You can look inside the club, and isn't Stryper on stage sound checking? Wow. Now get this, kids, all right? When I saw them before, 1989, this was at the peak of their popularity. the peak of their power, okay? They were a big, big presence on MTV. Their record, To Hell with the Devil, had gone platinum. They were a big freaking deal, right? Now, they were playing arenas at that point in time. You could not get close. You could not get close to this band, man. Fast forward 34 years, and, the landscape has changed just a little bit, and Stryper becomes like every other kind of band at this level. If you are Guns N' Roses, if you are Taylor freaking Swift, and every show you play is a stadium, then every show is going to be packed out and it doesn't matter, right? But if you are a layer or two beneath that, your big nights are going to be Friday, Saturday. That's indie bands, that's club bands. Friday, Saturday is going to be when your bigger crowds come and your bigger paydays come. I'm seeing Stryper on a Tuesday night, and it's a small venue, all right? It's a little rock club. You've been in a place like this, a certain vibe, a certain charisma. And the website says this place holds 800 people. And I don't know about that, man, but there are 2 rooms in this place. Maybe if you pack them out both at the same time, there's 800 people, but the people in one room are not seeing what's happening in the other and vice versa. I figure the club, when we saw the band, there were maybe 300 people is my guess, all right? But what this is a get you to the next stop gig, right? So it's a little club. It's on a Tuesday night. It's in Seattle. Let's make a little payday there, put enough gas in the bus to get us to Friday, Saturday, when they're probably playing a couple of theaters, a bigger crowd, bigger payday. This is one of those midweek dates, man. This is one of those midweek dates. And if you are at the level Stryper's at now, which is kind of club theater level, yeah, you play a small show Tuesday, Wednesday to get you to the weekend. And that's what I was there to see. 34 years ago, you could not get close to this band. They're playing arenas. You couldn't get close to them. Here we are, 2023. I'm looking in a security door, and they're 15 feet away from me doing sound check. And that for me is fascinating, all right? Because I'm a musician. I play shows. I want to watch pros at this level do a sound check. And guess what? It's the same as the sound check I do. One of my first favorite drummers was Robert Sweet of Stryper. I'm 10 years old when I'm encountering this guy. And there he is. He's sitting on his kit. And then all of a sudden, at a certain point, he just started playing. And so I am watching from 15, 20, well, a little bit further, 30, 40 feet away. I'm watching Robert Sweet playing the drums at soundcheck, just him, And then the other guys are on the stage and they're working stuff out and they're talking back and forth. They're having the same conversations that I have had so many times with different bands. And I felt a kinship, I felt a connection there to the freaking band. And there was a security guy on the door, young guy. And so I says to him, hey, man, do you mind us hanging around here? Do you mind us hanging around watching? Like, is that cool? He's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Just sort of keep a distance from the door. Okay. So it's dark in the club. It's light outside. You got your head in the door, and maybe I snapped a photo or two. You can see clear as day. You step back, you can't see so well, but you can hear just fine. And so they're running through some songs, they're playing. I'm like, this is really freaking cool, man. You do not get to see a band at that level doing that sort of the stuff around the show, the bus, the sound check, all that stuff. You don't ever get to see that. For me, it was fascinating and really, really cool. Now, the opener for this show was a cat called Les Carlsen, okay? Now, some of you who have a background like mine will know exactly who Les Carlsen is, okay? Les Carlsen is best known as the lead singer of the legendary Christian heavy metal band Bloodgood, okay? Now, back in the day, Christian heavy metal arose in the early 80s, okay? And then began to be popularized around 85, 86. Now, Stryper was in the vanguard of that. They were one of the bands that rose up to start this movement. And as I've said before, they existed somewhat separately from the mainstream Christian world. Stryper grew up on the Sunset Strip, all right? They were not always a Christian band. They were on the Strip with Motley Crue, with whoever was playing on the Strip back in the early 80s. Stryper was part of that community, part of that crowd. And they were a big part of that crowd. Before becoming Stryper, they were called Rock's Regime. And there are posters with come see, at the Whiskey or whatever, Rock's Regime with opener Metallica. You know what I mean? That kind of level, all right? They grew up in that world, and then they turned to a Christian faith, but they didn't leave that world. They stayed on the strip. They were doing what other people were doing, and they just changed the content of their lyrics, but they were not part of the mainstream Christian world. They were on secular labels. They were playing secular venues. They were in secular magazines. They were this curiosity. They were this curiosity in the mainstream music world, but they had hits, man. Like mid-'80s, they had legit MTV hits, man. They were a big freaking deal back in the day. Quite apart from the message, all right? Bloodgood, all right? Bloodgood came out of Seattle, first of all, but they were part of the mainstream Christian world. So they were that first vanguard of Christian heavy metal bands that came out on Christian labels as part of what was developing into a Christian scene. Bloodgood, Barren Cross, Messiah Prophet, Saint, Bride. There was a long, long list of some really not great music, to be perfectly honest, but also some really good stuff. And I always liked Bloodgood, all right? Bloodgood was one of the first bands that came out of that world, all right? And they had played with Stryper way, way back in the day, had done their own thing and done well within that kind of bubble of the Christian music world that Stryper was not ever actually in. So I've been a Bloodgood fan since like 1986, okay? And Les Carlsen, Bloodgood is not together anymore because their founding bass player, songwriter, Michael Bloodgood, died earlier this year? Died last year. Complications from a stroke. I talked about that on the show. Very sad thing. Bloodgood no longer exists as an entity, but Les Carlsen still exists. And he was opening this show, which for me is a treat, man, because I've been listening to this cat since 86. So we're watching the sound check. Rather, we're listening to it because we can't see in the club doors anymore. But I see kind of the silhouette of a person. I see long hair that looks kind of blonde. And I'm thinking that might be Robert Sweet, the drummer of Stryper, who's just sort of hanging around the door. Couldn't tell. And then this shadowy figure comes closer, and then emerges from the door, looking right at me and kind of pointing. And it's Les Carlsen himself. Les freaking Carlsen of Bloodgood is walking out this security door, and he's looking right at me as if he knew who I was. And I'm wondering now if Les thought I was somebody that he knew, and he came out with that kind of smile on his face, look of familiarity on his face, and I just beelined for him. It's like we drew together. And I was just pointed at him, and I'm like, Les Carlsen. And then he's just laughing, right? He's this really nice man. He's in his 70s now, you know what I mean? And so all of a sudden, Dews and I are having a chat with Les Carlsen himself, and it was really surreal and really cool, And I did not do the selfie thing. I do not tend to do the selfie thing, all right? I just was having a chat with a guy who I've been listening to for a long, long time. Interesting voice, Les Carlsen, had a really strange, really cool operatic voice. He did a lot of musical theater. I think he was in Jesus Christ Superstar or something like that. Like a big role, great singer, interesting voice. And I've been listening to this guy forever. And all of a sudden I'm shaking his hand and I'm talking to him. So we had a little chat with Les, and he's like, who are you guys? What's your name? I'm John. This is Jeff. We're from Canada. We came all the way from freaking Canada to see you, Les, little, elbow in the ribs there. And so we chatted for a minute, and then he goes back inside the club. We'll see you later. I said, hey, Les, we'll be expecting a shout out later. Ha ha ha. Everybody has a big laugh, right? Dews is laughing. I'm laughing. And then I turned to Dews and I says, he's going to give us a shout out, man. I just could tell. He's going to give us a shout out. So we watched a little more sound check, and then Stryper was done. And then the Les Carlsen, he was playing acoustically with some folks on stage. Paul Jackson, the guitar player from Bloodgood, was part of his band. Cool. And another couple people who are connected to Bloodgood were part of it too. We didn't stay around to watch his sound check. We watched a little bit. Great. Then we wandered off thinking it's Seattle. Surely there's coffee somewhere, right? No coffee. Could not find coffee in Seattle. It was getting towards the dinner hour, so we stopped at the Cheesecake Factory at which I have not eaten before. And we had ourselves a flatbread pizza. Very nice, great pre-show kind of food, a little bit of carbs, a little bit of carbs. And then we head back to the club. We head back to the club to see the freaking show, man. And the people are lined up. And here's a hot tip for you, okay? If you want to be popular at a metal show of any band from the 80s, do yourself a little favor, want to make some friends, wear yourself a King's X t-shirt. I do this everywhere I go. I represent everywhere I go at one of these shows, man. I wear my King's X Gretchen Goes to Nebraska t-shirt, and I had several finger points from people. I had several King's X, I love that band from people, I had the handshakes, I had the nods. Everybody loves the King's X at those shows, man. So you want to make friends, wear yourself a King's X t-shirt. I did that. We go in, and the people file into the club. It's a small room. It's a small room, man. It is a Tuesday night room. It is a room that you play when you are just trying to collect enough gas money to get to the bigger shows on the weekend, and that's exactly what we were doing. So we go in, we pick a nice spot, and it's a cool room. And I've not been in one of these rock clubs in a while. I certainly haven't played one in a while. I don't play a lot of rock music anymore, kids. I'm not often in one of these rooms anymore. There's a certain je ne sais quoi about a real hardcore rock club. Now, rumor has it that this particular club in a previous entity is where Pearl Jam got their start. Wow. So if you're not into the 80s metal scene, if you're listening to this with a bit of an eye roll happening, you came after that, you liked the grunge, Ken the Zen, Pearl Jam apparently started in this club. So there you go, man. But tonight, it was 80s metal night. It was rock and roll night. And I gotta say, I feel as though Stryper is finally getting their due. I feel as though Stryper is finally, after all these years, getting their cred. Stryper is in some ways like Steel Panther. In some ways, the reason that Steel Panther works is that the music is so good and the songs are legit, right? Now, the guys in Steel Panther are legit killer players, every one of them. And that's why the joke works, right? The songs are stupid. The songs are goofy and puerile and juvenile and obscene, but they're such pros that it freaking works. Stryper is very much the same. You do not need to be into the message, all right? You may not enjoy the lyrics that much, but when you look past that, these guys are killer freaking players, all right? Michael Sweet, Oz Fox, they're as good as anybody, all right? Straight up, anybody from the scene, those guys can hang on guitar, man. They are all great players. Again, they came out of the strip, man. They came out of that world. Bands were opening for them that went on to stardom. You know what I mean? Legit killer players. But the problem is that they were kind of always fighting this tide of the Christian thing, for starters, and then B, the image. The image, right? But this was the 80s. Every glam metal band had the image, right? The teased up hair, the makeup, the spandex, the whole thing. Stryper took it to interesting levels because the yellow and black stripes, that was their vibe. And Michael Sweet, the singer, guitar player, songwriter, posted something very interesting on Instagram last week. And it was a picture of Eddie Van Halen's black and white striped guitar. Now, Eddie Van Halen is a huge influence on these guys. They're California guys, man. They're LA Sunset Strip guys. Michael Sweet posted a photo of Eddie's black and yellow guitar, and he's like, where do you think we got our idea for the stripes from? Now, it ties into the name Stryper, which is a reference to the Bible verse, Isaiah 53:5. By his stripes we are healed. All right, it pulls through. There's a whole story here. There's a whole lineage. But a lot of people didn't take them seriously because of the Christian message. A lot of people didn't take them seriously because of the image, right? And so people couldn't look past, people couldn't listen past a lot of that to hear how good the music is, to hear what great players they are. Michael Sweet's voice holds up against any of them. And it still does. And that's one of the reasons that I think they're getting their due now. Because finally, they're being recognized as elder statesmen. They are one of the few bands of the heyday of 80s metal that are still around, not just playing nostalgia shows and county fairs, but actually putting out new records, all right? Prolifically. They've put out several records in the past 10 years, and that's some of their best stuff, all right? The stuff is heavier than it's ever been. It's rocking. They are still at the peak of their powers in terms of songwriting and what they're doing, and they're beginning to be recognized now for the legacy they've got that runs 40 freaking years now. All these records, and Stryper has a sound that nobody else has, all right? They have a sound that nobody else has. Their guitars are tuned. There's something called the Stryper tuning. I don't know what it is. I ain't a guitar player. But they sound unique. Their production is unique. Their guitars sound unique. Michael Sweet's voice is unique. Their harmonies. Nobody sounds quite like Stryper does. And I think finally now, all these years later, people are just looking past the lyrics, looking past the old image. All right, that image does not really persist. There's still some yellow and black on stage. We stood right out front of Oz Fox, like 4 people deep. Oz Fox, the other guitar player, who we're happy to see still around, man. Oz has been, over the past few years, he's had surgery for brain tumors. He's lost his hearing in one ear as a result of that. I mean, he's had a really, really tough time. These guys are in their 60s, man, still out there on the road pounding away. And Oz is crushing it, man. He's wearing, yellow and black stripes for sure. But the rest of them, not so much. It's still there. It is part of the image and it always will be. But it's not glammed out like it used to be, man. So they've backed off that a little bit. And there wasn't a whole lot of Christian message either. Michael Sweet didn't say a lot. My impression of this gig is, and this may not be a service to the people who are in the audience, 300 or 400 of us, felt like they were holding back a bit on this gig. All right. One of the things that Michael Sweet is most noted for is those high screams, which he still does. All right. They are touring right now on a record called The Final Battle. And if you listen to that record, it's just wall to wall. It's over screaming. It's too much. Crazy notes, man. Crazy notes that he's still hitting, at least in the studio. He didn't do a lot of that on this show. I think he was saving himself. So the voice is still there, all right? Do not get me wrong. Still there, full power. You know what I mean? Just full on power. And he's one of the few who still has that. And he's being recognized for it at a time when people like Vince Neil and John Bon Jovi and Don Dokken and even Joe Elliott, some of these guys are getting panned for not being able to sing anymore. John Bon Jovi is a crisis. He opens his mouth, nothing happens. It's frail. It's weak. Something's going on with his throat, man. But Michael Sweet still has full power, full voice, and he sang hard. He sang hard on this freaking show, man. But he did not go after a lot of those high notes that he's most noted for. He did a couple just to show us, I still got it. I'm choosing on this Tuesday night gig to maybe save it. He didn't do a whole lot of talking between the songs. I really think he was saving his voice. They're still doing the Stryper Bibles, by the way. I got hit in the hand with one of them. This was part of the gimmick back in the day. They had these Bibles. They were New Testaments with the Stryper logo on them. And they would just throw them out to the crowd, And they're still doing that. Every now and again, one of them will wander over to a speaker or something, an amp, pick up a couple, throw them out to the crowd. It's kind of a fun thing now, And I almost got one, but it bounced off my hand and then fell into some gear. Like all the road cases were stacked beside us. It was that small. There's no place to even put the road cases in this place, right? But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, it was Les Carlsen and his band of merry men and his wife, Joyce. And they're in their 70s and they're just crushing. Les still sounds great. He does not have the high end that he, like way back in the day in the 80s, Les Carlsen was doing crazy stuff with that voice, man. But at 70 years old, he's still doing it, still nailing it, played acoustically, a couple new songs. He's got a new album out called He Is Coming, and I've heard a bit of that, and it's pretty cool. If you were a Bloodgood fan back in the day, check it out. And he played a bunch of Bloodgood stuff, though. He was only on for about half an hour, maybe. Played a bunch of Bloodgood stuff. And at the end of it, He was saying his thank yous. And what did he say, kids? Thank you all for coming out. Happy to open for this wonderful band, Stryper, friends of ours. Thank you. Have a great night. And shout out to John and Jeff from Canada. Oh, yeah. Les Carlsen gave us the shout out, kids. And that's kicking off your night. That's kicking off your night in a good way. Shout out to John and Jeff from Canada. That's a pro. That's a pro, kids. Remembered our names. Remembered the conversation. Remembered to shout us out. That's a pro at work, man. That is very savvy. Stryper comes on. They plug in. And they just crushed it. They just crushed it, man. They sounded great. They played great. Oz was right in front of us, crushing it, all the finger tapping stuff. They're great players. I mean, part of the signature Stryper sound is the guitarmonies, the dual guitar solos, and they're just ripping them all, man. And they have such a huge body of work now. But it was evident from the set list that To Hell with the Devil is still the record. That's like the double platinum record from 1986. Had several big hits on it. I remember distinctly being at the fall fair in my hometown, which was a highlight of our annual calendar. And back in the mid 80s, when the glam was really happening, I remember they were playing metal for the fair. Like the music for the fair was Y&T, and it was Poison, and it was whatever. And I remember distinctly hearing, as I was playing a video game somewhere, probably Karate Champ or something like that, because I knew how to do the front kick and then the back kick. That's all I had, though. I could only last a few rounds and then I'd get killed. I distinctly remember hearing them play Free by Stryper as part of that group. See, this is none of the other Christian bands were ever included in the soundtrack to your fall fair with Dawkins and Y&T. You know what I mean? And Kiss. They weren't. Stryper was. They were just was a different world that they were in than everybody else, man. I distinctly remember Free from that record. Great song, and they played it. They did back-to-back. They did Calling on You and Free, which follow each other on the To Hell with the Devil record. Two big MTV hits. There are videos for both of those songs. Big MTV hits. Played them back to back. They did 5 songs from that record, right? There are 10 songs on that record. They did 5 of them. And then they did a song or two from everything else. There was one album called Against the Law, which was the last gasp of the original run of this band. It was like 91, 90, something like that, where they totally changed their sound and their style. They dropped the yellow and black. They grew out goatees, and they made what somebody described as a nerf metal album. It was much more of I don't know how you would describe it. Against the Law is a real outlier in the Stryper catalog. I talked about how they have their own unique sound, the way their guitars are produced, the way they're tuned. This album did not do that. All right, it sounded much more like a standard hair metal album because they were going for radio hits. They were going for a change of sound. Against the Law, it was kind of a statement too. I've said before that I really want to ask Michael Sweet how much pressure was on them being that band in that time, being this Christian band utterly under the microscope, being hated by secular audiences and being hated by elements of the Christian world too, hated for being Christians, hated for being metal players. You know what I mean? Like so much pressure. And they were under it all the time, like under a freaking microscope. They could not misstep. They could not misstep and seem to prove all of the people right in Christendom who were calling them frauds, who were looking for them to fall, looking for them to fail. And I think at a certain point, they were just fed up with it, right? So early 90s come along. They release this album Against the Law, which is a lot of songs about women. A lot of songs about relationships, two-time woman. And it's a great, great record of the time. It's very much overlooked, and it did not blow them to the next level that I think they thought it would. Some of their best songs, though, it's an outlier in their catalog, and it's freaking great. And they played one song, All for One, from that album. They played from all the albums, and some of their more recent stuff from like 2013 on is really good and really heavy, man. And this is why I say they're finally getting their due, because they're one of the few that are still doing it. still releasing new music. You know, I heard rumors last year after the big stadium tour. Poison thinking about doing a new record. I mean, Poison's touring stadiums, still playing hits from Look What the Cat Dragged In. There hasn't been anything new for 30 years from Poison. Stryper's banging out an album a year, and it's good stuff, and it's heavy stuff. It's ambitious stuff. And they're finally getting the credit that they've always deserved for being killer players and being a great band. And it's fun to see that, you know, the elder statesman. I had a couple of complaints. I don't want to be complaining about this. Robert Sweet's whole thing is the drummer. They call him the visual timekeeper. And even in his mid-60s, he's still very flamboyant. He's still like, I watched him break several drumsticks. I watched the ends fly off these sticks. He's hitting hard, man. And he always had these giant 80s kits, you know, what it was like back in the day. I think at one point he had a kit with 8 bass drums, something like that, 4 of which didn't even have pedals, and it would spin around on a platform. Like it was a full-on 80s excess. They were making a lot of money, kids, but he always sets up sideways so that ostensibly you can see what he's doing. You know, he's always set up sideways. Problem is, on this show, the stage was small, I guess. They had a couple of signs in front of him, so you could just see his head and shoulders. But you couldn't see anything else. And I thought, well, that's annoying. You know, you want to watch Rob play. Can't even see him. And then, yeah, there were some tracks happening. Pretty sure there were some tracks happening, and I'm going to cut some slack on that. My complaint is about the mix, and it could have been just where we were standing in the room. But there were a lot of times when 3 people were singing, but you could really just hear Michael Sweet. So instead of the melody, he would be singing a harmony, and Oz or Perry Richardson would have the melody, but you couldn't hear them. And so you would just get this harmony, and that's it. And yet there was other times, like when they did Calling on You, when they did Free, where you could hear 3 voices or more, and it's like, yeah, pretty sure there's tracks happening here. I'm going to cut them some slack for that, though, all right? Because the huge vocal harmonies are such a part of their sound. They kind of got to have them in the mix. And I can tell that Oz and Perry are singing, but I think they're being helped along. And I'm pretty sure, in fact, I listened back to a few seconds of Calling on You that I recorded, and there's a keyboard happening. Nobody playing keys on stage, but there's a keyboard happening. And, you know, that's just the way it is. It's the way it always was. A lot of bands have done that. A lot of bands are doing that. Michael Sweet is for sure singing, and everybody's for sure playing. You know, because there are bands out there who shall remain nameless who are getting called out for having their whole freaking show on tracks. You know, the singer isn't singing a note all night. It's all on tracks. And I got a real problem with that, man. But you want to drop in some keyboard, you want to drop in some vocal harmonies in the back, okay. Everybody pretty much is doing that. And it was a great show. It was a really fun show, and it was fun to see those guys, and it's fun to see them still crushing, man. You know, 40 years later, the band is still doing it, still releasing good records, still playing hard, still putting on a great show, and it's inspiring. It's inspiring for those of us who are sneaking up on the half century to be able to see that, you know, keep going. It's the same with King's X. You know, Doug is 73 this year. Still out there on the road, still doing it, man. So if you are, you know, comfortably set into middle age, still have dreams of being out there playing, it's possible to do. Helps if you started 40 years ago and have a platinum record. But if you don't, you know, you can keep your chops up, you can keep your voice up, work on it, and you can still be out there playing, and that's very exciting, and I'm glad for them, and I'm glad we went. Glad I took the step to fly all the way out there for just a couple days and fly home. And saw myself a really fun show. And not just for the nostalgia factor, all right. It was a really good show by a top-level band. And if you've ever been a fan of Stryper, haven't thought about them in a long time, go listen, all right? Their new album is The Final Battle. The one before that, Even the Devil Believes, killer record. One of their best by far. And if you're looking for, you know, a good time with a great band, in a safe crowd, because we're all 50s, 60s now. Check them out on this tour, all right? They're still playing a lot of dates. Go check them out. I think you'll have a really good freaking time. I intended to cap this at 40 minutes. My voice is just ravaged. The sore throat, man, the sore throat in the back of the nose. This is the third freaking time. I'm going to do a quick Patreon plug. If you've come this far, I thank you so much. There is a Patreon page for this program. It is patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. I have a $5 one-tier membership fee, all right? And if you sign up for it, and I hope you do, it's just a way to support the show, man. It's a way to help me cover some of my expenses, try to grow this thing. You know, you can think of it, as I always say, of tipping me $1.25 for every episode I do. If you think to yourself, I'm being inspired, educated, entertained by some of this stuff, the music, the history we're talking about. If you think to yourself, you know what, I'd pay $1.25 for that, I would appreciate you doing so at patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. I don't have the voice to do the full Patreon plug. Thank you to all the people who have done that so far. I appreciate it so much. Follow me on the socials, John Huff Podcast, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Mostly it's on Instagram and Facebook these days. Do me a favor, please share these episodes. Do me a favor, please leave me a rating and review. That warms my cockles, kids, helps the show move up the visibility ladder, okay? I'm fighting the tide myself here. Fighting against all these celebrity podcasts funded by big studios, big marketing money. You know, I'm trying to compete. Julia Louis-Dreyfus has a podcast now. You know what I mean? It's like, I can't. So ratings and reviews help me inch up that visibility ladder. I'm going in weird circles there. Just saying, thank you so much if you followed me on Patreon. And please do consider leaving me a rating and review. Takes 2 seconds to leave me a 5-star. Makes me feel good inside. Lets me know that people are listening, okay? Before we go, I have got to comment on Steel Panther's appearance on America's Got Talent. Everybody's sending me this, right? Because they know I'm a big Steel Panther guy. And I got to be honest, I have a lot of trouble watching it. And it's not because of Steel Panther. I don't know what they're doing on that show. I thought that was supposed to be for amateurs. I don't watch this stuff, so I don't know. But good for them. Smart move. I mean, Steel Panther for a couple weeks has been on everybody's lips, right? And they're being introduced to millions of people who probably don't know who they are. And I'm amazed more than anything that they found a song they could actually sing on national television, which was Eyes of a Panther. You know, anytime I encounter somebody of a delicate constitution who wants to know a little bit about Steel Panther, I have a problem because there's nothing I can send you. There isn't a single song I can send you that won't make me feel just a little bit weird because their songs are gleefully filthy. Filthy. Top to bottom, every last freaking one. That's the point. This is a send-up of the excesses of 80s rock life, right? Sex, drugs, rock and roll, taken to insane and hilarious extremes, right? So I can't recommend them. It's like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if we can be friends anymore after you hear some of what I'm listening to and have gone to see live like 5 times. The problem I have with America's Got Talent, the reason I can't really watch it without cringing is just the over-the-top, obnoxious, kind of condescending reactions. I just can't deal with it, man. Like Michael Starr hits a high note, and the place goes freaking bananas, like an alien burst out of his chest. You know what I mean? And I love Terry Crews, but they'll like flash the camera to Terry Crews like Satchel will whip a guitar solo, and they flash to Terry Crews, and he's just like, what? Like nobody's ever played a freaking guitar before? Give me a break, man. And they'll flash to the judges panel, and they'll be just mouths agape. You know what I mean? And the truth is, nobody reacts to anything that way. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. What's the most heinous thing you can think of? Nobody stands there gobsmacked, especially if it's just a band of professional musicians playing music. Like, the reactions are so obnoxious and phony and fake that I just can't deal. It just makes me freaking cringe, you know, listening to the way the audience, you know, there's a sign that pops up that says scream, and then they all scream. And then a sign that pops up that says surprised, and everybody looks surprised. It's so manufactured. and so fake that I just can't deal. I just can't do it, all right? It's just me. It's just me. But it was fun to see them on there, and they crushed it. And why wouldn't they? They've been professional players for 30 freaking years. They're a world touring band. They play Wacken Festival, for crying out loud. Of course they're good. I don't know what America's Got Talent's supposed to be about, but it was fun to see them repping. It was not so fun to listen to the fake reactions from everybody and see people just being so... This is the problem. There's so much fake in the world. There's so much phony and BS in the entertainment industry that just to see it displayed so blatantly kind of rubs me the wrong way. Maybe I'm jaded. Maybe I'm turning into an old man. But I just found that really difficult to take. And so that's my take on Steel Panther on America's Got Talent. And I don't know what that show is supposed to be about. Like, Sofia Vergara says right on the show, yeah, I hired these guys to play my husband's birthday party. So why are you looking so shocked, Sophia? Like, you know, bothers me. It's the phoniness. The phoniness really bothers me. And the phoniness in public discourse, the phoniness in the media, the phoniness in the entertainment world. For me, it's just on full display when I see that, and it irritates me. I know we're mostly positive talk. There's a reason why I put mostly in that description, okay? But good for Steel Panther, finding a new audience, repping for, guitars and drums. That's cool, and they are a great freaking band. They're an amazing band. That's why it works. I already said that, I haven't got the voice to go further. I want to thank you for listening this long. If you did, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you missed me while I was gone. I'm back now. Hopefully next week I'll actually be able to talk properly. Thank you for listening. I'm going to shut up, shutting up. Remember, good things happen when you put yourself out there. The Strypers of the world, the Bloodgoods of the world, the Steel Panthers of the world, the Terry Cruzes of the world. At some point in time, even the Sofia Vergaras of the world. At a certain point in time, put themselves out there, kids, and look where they are now. Have yourselves a fine week. Drop me a line, john-huff.com/contact, or via the socials. I got the t-shirts. I got the mugs. Go to the website. You'll find it. Thank you for listening. I'm going to sign off now. I will be back in a week with something. Until then, please do take care of yourselves. And hey, I'll check you later. Yeah. Well, maybe I hear the blues are calling, tossed salads and scrambled eggs. Well, maybe I seem a bit confused, but baby, I got you pegged. But I still don't know what to do with those tossed salads and scrambled eggs. They're calling again. Good night, Seattle. We love you.